You're listening to KMRE 102.3 FM in beautiful Bellingham, Washington. Your community, your voice, your station. I'm Matt Benoit, and this is Are You Serious? It's the local comedy podcast where comedians get real. My guest today is Bellingham comedian Brett Emerson. How you doing, Brett?
Hello. I am about to take a math test later this evening, so paranoid.
That's exciting. All right.
Confident but paranoid.
I thought you were going to say parabola, but...
Parabolas are going to be involved.
Yes.
Give a round of applause going for Brett Emerson.
I had a surprisingly normal childhood in the Midwest. I was born in Wisconsin, right on the Mississippi River, and grew up
I was going to say, one time I tried the Not Your Dad's Root Beer, and isn't that where that's made?
I think so. I'm not sure exactly where.
What town are you from?
I'm from LaCrosse, Wisconsin.
LaCrosse, yeah, that's where it's made.
It actually used to be the main industry in LaCrosse, used to be a brewery, and then they stopped producing beer, and now they produce, I think, fruit drinks and sodas, so it totally would make sense if that came from there. Okay. It's a town where I believe it has the most bars per capita of anywhere, at least in the country. Wow. It's an alcoholic town. People get drunk, they fall in the river, and there's an urban legend that there's a serial killer who pushes people into the river, where the river's about 3 blocks away from the downtown. So it's not... I would be more inclined to believe that theory if it was 12 blocks away from downtown, but this has been a nationally covered story where people are like, there's a serial killer, and I'm like, yeah, it's alcohol.
Yeah, that's right.
I wish alcoholics talked about our drug the way that potheads talk about theirs. Like some old crusty dude will just stumble up to you outside JJ's and go, gin's gonna open up your mind and expand your consciousness, dude. But the government doesn't want you to know that. Did you know that you can cure glaucoma with some tequila? Did you know that if you combine orange juice and vodka, you can make rope?
My mom and I used to just watch a lot of sitcoms, like Roseanne, The Cosby Show, and she started giving me cassettes of Bill Cosby albums. And so I would listen to those at night and got really into Bill Cosby. There were a lot of his older albums. Himself was one of them when I was a kid. So some of the stuff that he did in the 70s and some of the stuff he did in the 80s. And that was my first introduction to stand-up in and of itself. My sister also got me into Def Comedy Jam.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, Russell Simmons and Martin Lawrence and a lot of black comedians. So that was something I was really into. And then my mom also was the person who got me into George Carlin. I was watching an HBO special of one of Carlin's specials, and he's swearing his head off. And my mom was watching it with me, and she said, he's so intelligent. And somehow, and I had always sworn, my sister is 10 years older than me, taught me to swear when I was 3. We stole a car together when I was a child in a car seat. She stole my mom's car and went driving with it, and I'm in this car seat, and my grandfather saw her when she got out and was running around the car with her friends. And so I've been a party to crime since I was a toddler. So it wasn't the swearing was sort of this forbidden thing in the house, but it was strange to have my mom and me watching George Carlin and she remarking that swearing is not incompatible with intelligence and being smart and being clever. So that was kind of a watershed moment for me in just being into as a smart kid, as a kid who went to smart summer camps and stuff like that, just being you can still swear, you can be funny and be smart. So, and I think in my adulthood, I just started collecting comedy albums, started listening to more Bill Hicks and more things later on.
Because that's the comparison that a lot of people I've heard of in town like compare you to like a young Bill Hicks type comedian.
Which is funny because I'm older than he was when he died.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was only like 32 when he died.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So I am a young 37-year-old Bill Hicks. Yeah, I've always been interested in just being sort of a very intense kind of idealistic like person, always kind of going for, and not exclusively, but going for having ideas, even if they're dumb ideas, but just, I don't know. I like doing all sorts of comedy, but I definitely gravitate toward philosophical comedy. Having a philosophy degree, that probably makes sense. Conversational, I don't know. It's weird. Doesn't always result in laughs.
Yeah.
But that's fine.
When I was 16 years old, I told my mom, I'm a major in philosophy. She's like, why? I'm like, yeah. Because I want to be so super smart, and I don't want to go to college just to get a job. Well, mission accomplished. Right, my philosophy teacher told me that if you get a philosophy degree, you're the smartest person in the room, and that's true, but that room is a bus. Yeah.
After the band I moved to LA with just fell apart, and I moved back to Wisconsin, and then a lot of the people who were in the band, we all kind of regrouped in Wisconsin. We ended up forming a band because when we were in LA, we all got really, really, really into Saved by the Bell. And there was sort of a running joke that all the dudes in Saved by the Bell were screwing each other. And there was a lot of erotic fan fiction written, a lot of kind of aristocrats kind of jokes written about the guys from Saved by the Bell. And so we formed a band in LaCrosse about that. And it was bizarre, it was weird, it was very intense and punk. I was the singer, the lyrics were hilarious. I would stand on bars and bar stools wearing nothing but a strategically placed knee pad and singing weird jokes. It was super punk. It was comedy punk. And for one of the shows I ended up, and I've always wanted to do stand-up, but LaCrosse is not the place where you can do stand-up really. But for one of these shows in this bar where we were friends with the bartender, so she let us just do whatever we want, I ended up opening for the band and trying to do stand-up, and this was like 2009. And I had no idea what I was doing. I did 40 minutes.
40 minutes? The first time you technically did stand-up, you did 40 minutes.
And it was just basically reading off of whatever I had printed out verbatim.
Wow.
And a lot of it was just, this is dumb. I think this is it was ranting. It was full ranting. And a lot of my friends, because mostly the audience was my friends, started heckling me, which was frustrating and kind of made me say, I don't want to do this anymore. One of my friends, the drummer from the band, was like, no, you should keep doing this. You should, like, there's something here. And I didn't do it regularly until the Frog opened in 2013. So that was like a 4-year period where I didn't really do stand-up. I kind of did it at the Upfront open mics when that was the only show in town, when DK and Morgan were doing the once a month.
Because you started, when you came here, you started doing improv classes and GBUs, and you started doing improv regularly before you got into stand-up.
Yeah, because I had moved out here and my thought was, I hope there's a stand-up scene out here so I can finally start doing it. And there really wasn't, but there was improv.
Yeah.
So I kind of started taking classes, started doing a lot of the student shows. I did improv for about 4 years. There was a little bit of overlap between doing improv and doing stand-up. But once I really started getting into stand-up, I really pulled away from improv and just kind of never had the chance to get back into it. I'd like to do it again. It's just, other things kind of popped up and just ended up not really working out for me.
I don't think I'm out of line when I think that the Valtrex herpes medication commercials make herpes look fucking awesome. Like, I look at those people, and these couples are having more fun than I've ever had in a relationship. And I think to myself, what one-night stand do I have to have so I can ride a tandem bike and slow dance on the beach, fuckers? Oh my God, the only way I could get more pumped up about BB medicine is if Arnold Schwarzenegger promoted a product called Hasta la Vista Scabies.
For many years, I had literally one friend in town that I hung out with, and we were out drinking one night at, I think it was Ishka, and we walked into Timmy Riney, who runs the Green Frog show, and Casey was an old drinking buddy of his, and my friend Casey knew that I was always into doing stand-up and just never could, and knew that Timmy was starting the show, and I think he had just done his first show, the first Guffawingham, and so he introduced me to Timmy, and that's how I got hooked up into this new comedy scene that just kind of sprang up almost out of nowhere.
And I love living out here, except when I moved out here first, it was really, really difficult for me to get a job. Like, I applied at Avalon Music, and I got turned down because I don't smoke pot that often. Like, I failed a drug test in reverse. And the dude liked me. He wanted to help me. He gave me a joint and a Sublime album, told me to come back when I'm ready for the retest.
Do you feel like having a lot of terrible day jobs helps you want to write jokes, especially because some of the weird crap that happens at these jobs?
I feel like my issues with getting jobs in this town in general kind of fuels it, because I moved into this town with years and years of work experience, management experience, kind of coming in with a degree, things like that. And I spent the first year living out here sleeping on a mattress and not getting a job. Mm-hmm. And it has been harder for me to find work here than I've been able to find anywhere else. Wow. And that fuels it a lot. There's definitely some bitterness and a little bit of resentment and just kind of where I am work-wise in general. The first job I got when I moved out here was at a Five Guys, which was a nightmare. And then Jimmy John's for 4 years, which was worse than it should have been for many reasons, and is something where you're in your 30s and you're working at a food job, a fast food job, and you're like, this is beneath me. Mm-hmm. This is so beneath me. It's not even funny. And I got out of there, ended up working at a Spencer's in the mall, selling dildos to teenagers, and that was better. It's kind of like a slow incline up, but still kind of like, I don't want to work retail, I don't want to be in the mall. Right now I work in a thrift shop, and it's better than that, but it's still not where I want to be. Right. It's still stressful. It's still like causes problems for me mentally and emotionally, and I'm working toward getting licensed as a teacher, so that's that's where I want to get to, getting what I would call a real job. And it's been way more of a struggle than I thought, and that does definitely fuel my comedy. That does. I developed some jokes when I was working at Spencer's in the mall, dildo jokes that I used as a crutch for so many years that I kind of hate those jokes now, even though I know they work, the kind of thing. So now I'm working on thrift shop jokes. So just kind of hoping that those don't become the same crutch, which would mean that I'm there for too long.
I was on a Christian website for trolling purposes, and I saw a quote that said, "Without God, chastity is impossible." And the name of the guy who said it was Father John Hardon. Like saying, I'm going to learn about kosher law from Rabbi Bacon.
You moved from Wisconsin, and you told me before that you often felt like an outsider. How did getting into the stand-up scene help you change that feeling?
At the time that I had started doing stand-up, I had just broken up with my girlfriend who I moved out here with, and I had been together with her for 3 years, and it ended in a very bad way. And at the same time, we ended up living with each other for 2 more years after that.
Wow.
It was, I learned a lot, which isn't necessarily a positive thing. There were some positives. We still talk today, but there was a lot of screaming afterwards, but there was also a lot of like points where it became the relationship it should have been when we were together, because there was a lot more honesty and there was a lot more kind of unconditional kind of, I don't know, empathy, things like that. So at the time when I was starting to do stand-up, I was in one of the low points of my life. It was extremely damaging. And so, and having one friend and now my girlfriend becoming my ex-girlfriend was she was like the other person I would hang out with all the time. So, it cuts my available interactions with people in half. So getting into a tribe where, we're all doing stand-up and nobody really knows each other and there haven't been any established cliques, at least gave me people to talk to. I'm not really chummy at shows, but that's just because I'm really intense and really trying to not screw up and getting everything in mind and getting, I approach stand-up so much like I'm taking a test. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. It makes me, I'm so paranoid even when I feel like I have everything down. So for a long time, it wasn't like I was making friends in stand-up. I was, there were people I was hanging out with. There were people I liked a lot, and I was into their comedy. But it wasn't something where we're hanging out outside of stand-up, or I could just go over to someone's house and watch TV just because I felt like it. And that's kind of changed now, but it's been years. It's taken years for that to form, with actually having comedian friends outside of just being in the same room as each other at a show. So yeah, it took a long time. It's taken a long time for me to find my equilibrium in this town. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of reasons, but it's kind of actually feeling okay now. But that's probably a development that happened within the last maybe like 2 years. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I spent 5 years out here alienated from pretty much everyone, and even the people I liked I wasn't friends with, right. Buddies or whatever, just people I kind of liked being around, mm-hmm. which isn't quite the same thing.
No,
so
there's a difference between acquaintances and friends.
So it's been real weird and real kind of gray for a long time, and mm-hmm. then I would go back to Wisconsin and hang out with my friends and not feel that, and feel like when you have people who've known you for literally half your life and you don't have to catch up. You don't have to have awkward conversations, anything like that. You just go back and you're instantly the same person. And that, that sort of familiarity never happened for me here for a long, long time. And still kind of isn't. But at the same time, Wisconsin isn't home either anymore. Mm-hmm. I have 3 or 4 friends and my mom and some family members out there who get me, and that's not enough for me to want to go back. My name is Brett Emerson. I'm 37 years old, and every day of my life, I think about killing myself. I have been told that I need to add some polish to my intros.
So, you've got a lot of material about a vast number of subjects. Yeah. But obviously one of the darkest places you go in your stand-up is in your material about suicide, and how at various points in your life you have either seriously considered it or even attempted it. So, tell me about, what was going on behind those jokes. I mean, how close have you come to suicide, and what stopped you from going through with it?
I think that it's going to be hard to kind of explain this, because I feel like I look at suicide differently than people. the lowest point of my life was when I was just on my 25th birthday. I tried to kill myself, and that was like what I kind of describe as the big suicide attempt.
Right.
I feel like that was me trying to make things better. I feel like, at least for me, and feel free to disagree, I feel like thinking about suicide is hopeful. It's thinking that there's still something that you can do to change your situation, to make it better, and it goes to this extreme where the solution is to not exist. I got worse after that attempt. It was basically a year and a half where I just kind of stared at a wall for, that time, and had, tried to dig my way out of it now and again, but just didn't. And this was when I was in California, and I only got out of it by escaping California and moving back to Wisconsin with all my friends who moved back. I literally barely escaped with my life. I don't know. It felt better when I was just like, yeah, let's fix this, And now I feel like it hasn't gone away. Like, those thoughts haven't gone away, but it's different now. And it's something a new thing I'm working through with my comedy, and sort of examining that and describing it. Because I feel like when I was younger, there was always like a cause of, this is why you want to kill yourself. And it's usually a person. It's usually love.
Yeah.
Something I'm very not suited to. A lot of it was just, caused externally. Something is being taken from you, and you feel like that was the only chance you have at having, love or, purpose or whatever. And let me just say that when I was 25, and that was 12 years ago, that was the last time I tried to kill myself. So I'm not exactly a flight risk at this point.
Right.
The second time I tried to commit suicide, 25th birthday, girl left me. I had drank an entire bottle of whiskey, half bottle of Fireball, an entire bottle of schnapps, because death is no reason to have bad breath. Drove blackout drunk through 2 towns and wrapped my belt around my neck and hung myself off a balcony.
It's like every day I have to make the choice to stay alive, which I feel is kind of positive in a weird, demented way. It's just, things suck, and I just realized there's a way out. You could leave this.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it still gets really bad. Sometimes it doesn't go away. It's not like I did my time and now I have a clean bill of mental health. Right. A lot of it is, it's an indicator. It's an indicator of, I'm not where I want to be. And I feel like, not that, thinking about not existing is ever going to be completely gone, but it definitely lessens when I'm in places and situations and environments where I know I'm doing what I should be. So it's, suicidal thoughts are kind of a good warning signal, as long as you don't have the means nearby.
Yeah.
I will never own a gun in my life, because I would have one bad day and that would be it.
Yep.
I heard that veterinarians kill themselves, I think, like at 4 times the rate of most people, and a lot of it is because they have access to drugs that put you to sleep.
Yeah.
They can put a horse to sleep, so they could definitely, painless, not messy, totally kind of an efficient way of doing yourself in.
Yeah.
And it's like I keep the opportunity away from myself, so I can kind of, dive into that darkness and then come out and then, go to sleep, wake up the next day, and you're kind of reset.
When you do stand-up, do you feel like this is a place you're supposed to be?
If it goes well.
Let's say, because when it doesn't go well, then
my 30s have kind of been a decade where I'm learning how to deal with judgment. Moving out to Western Washington has made that kind of intensified, because I think Western Washington got a lot of judgment in it.
Mm-hmm. Very passive-aggressive type of place.
Passive-aggressive, very very call out and I think a lot of times warranted, but sometimes I think people have kind of a hero complex out here in a way where I don't see that in the Midwest. I think people in the Midwest are sometimes too passive, and not passive aggressive, but just sort of, I have a joke with people in Wisconsin rock the boat less than dry land.
Yeah.
So it's different out here. So there's kind of, fear of judgment for saying the wrong thing to the wrong person, or, being vaguely inappropriate, saying something that's unpopular and then just getting blasted for it publicly. Also, the fear of judgment in terms of not getting a job I want, or fear of judgment about performing poorly, which is something I'm getting better at dealing with on stage. But a lot of that just has to do with I need to start writing things for me, which is kind of why I'm working on this new suicide kind of full set. It's about 10 minutes now, and it's like something I feel good about. Like, the first time I felt like a real comedian was I was doing a show at Cosmic Comics, and I was just kind of floundering through my set, and it was a pretty full room, and I was doing okay, but I wasn't doing great. And I had been thinking about this joke and kind of talking about suicide, but the fear of judgment kind of had been following me for a few months beforehand. When people talk about stand-up, they like to debate what's okay in stand-up and what's not okay. And my thought is, it's okay if you're smart. I'm very much a comedy libertarian in that you can say whatever you want, but you have to live or die by it.
Yeah.
The market will decide whether you are funny or not. So I didn't do this suicide joke for a long time, but I was just having this bad set, or bad by my standards. I'm insane. I'm very much a megalomaniac, and everything has to be perfect or else it's the worst, which is part of my problem mentally. But I just kind of said,
sound like an inverse Trump. It's the worst. Everything's the worst. It's terrible.
I have such big hands and such a frail ego. Yeah. So I just said, the hell with it. Hey everybody, let's just talk about suicide for a second.
I tried to kill myself my 25th birthday. I hung myself with my own belt and hung myself off of a balcony. And I used to tell myself that I could never do a pull-up to save my life. Well, I proved myself wrong.
It was so gratifying and kind of validated me as a person in a way that I have sets and bits and things like that I know work all the time, and before that, but that was the first time where I felt like I had broken through to something, to like the person I kind of actually am. I have other weird, absurd jokes and things that are clever and smart and weird and gross, but that was the first thing where I was like, that was real. Like that's not a story that's made up either.
Right.
Like I hung myself on my 25th birthday.
So you did that at home? You tried to hang yourself?
Yeah, it was a girl thing. It's what I'm starting to call like young suicide. We were trying to like still be friends and hang out, but she had moved on, and it got bad. So I got really hammered at this show and just drove home blackout drunk through 2 towns and got to my home somehow. I am an extremely high functioning drunk. Like when I'm blacked out, I don't know where it comes from, but it's like a superpower. So I got home, drove home perfectly, parked perfectly, and then just stared at a wall for about 8 hours, did not move, and then was just like, I'm done.
Wow.
And then just went to the balcony in my living room and strung myself up and was just kind of up there and like, no, let's not do this. And then just, it didn't make me feel any better not doing it, but
Right.
It made me feel alive still,
Yeah.
It made me exist. So there's this fear I think I have in discussing it, both comedically and just publicly on Facebook, online, things like that, because I reject people trying to play hero. in terms of that. Not even people who would be offended by suicide jokes, because I feel like the way I'm presenting it is very personal, and it's not like, haha, kill yourself, meh, everyone
and
should
you're
die.
not talking about someone else, you're talking about you specifically.
I very much try to keep it focused on myself in a way where people who have been affected by suicide, other people, like, may not like it, but hopefully they're not looking at it in something where I'm just kind of okay with the whole thing. Like, sometimes it gets into that, but it's not the focus.
Do you ever worry about grossly offending someone who's been who's had to deal with a loved one kill themselves?
No, because I would talk to them about it if they came up to me. Like, if they wanted to, if they were like, this happened and this is why I'm not okay with your joke, I would get it completely. And if they didn't want to talk to me about it, that's fine. They can hate me. But I would rather have somebody hate me for trying to kind of do this sort of honest material and just be done and just angry at me than be afraid of their reaction. Because a lot of my comedy is ruined by fear. A lot of who I am as a person is ruined by fear. And it's the judgment thing over and over again. Living out here in Bellingham as opposed to kind of being the big fish in a small pond back home, there's like, fear is a part of every aspect of my life. So a lot of what this last year is just trying to not be afraid, not just get over fear, which I feel like kind of paints it as more of a macho thing, but just to not be afraid of things, to not be afraid of myself and not be afraid of being sad about things all the time and not be afraid about being happy about things all the time. Like, there's so much just fear in my life, which is weird because I don't do anything, which is why I don't do anything, I guess.
Being paralyzed by fear is, I can definitely relate to that. That's, you're afraid to make a move, and so you don't do X, Y, or Z, and then X, Y, or Z doesn't, and nothing happens.
Afraid to make a move is a good way of putting it, because I've been single for like 4 years.
That'll be your comedy album.
Yeah, make a move.
Afraid to make a move.
So the second phase of suicide, it's when you're middle-aged and your life is going nowhere. I like to call it, on a bad day, I might move for Trump suicide. Yeah, it's the kind of suicide where when a stewardess waves you over and has you sit next to an emergency exit, you say, finally, a woman who gets me.
It makes me feel like a real comedian, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do all the clever, weird crap, too.
Yeah.
I do Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonations, which is not real. It's not honest. It's not something where I'm exposing myself beyond. I'm weirdly creative and strange, and that's fun. And I feel like most people who try to talk about dark material fail because your angles are weird or you're not putting enough of yourself in it. Like I said, I'm a comedy libertarian, but I also realize that most people suck at it, as far as being dark. I mean, a lot of the humor I had in my Gay Saved by the Bell punk band is not stuff that I think would fly today, and that's fine. It's I feel like you have to explore being wrong. I feel like comedy is a place where you have to have the leeway to be wrong, to say wrong things, to say horrible crap, and then realize that people don't react to that. Sometimes they will react to that if you're smart or clever or funny enough, but most times if you're telling something like a rape joke, it's not going to fly. And if you can make that work, then great, but that's not your decision to find out if that works. It's your decision to kind of, hedge the percentages and kind of write things that are clever and better thought out.
Slugs are the one animal in the world that cannot be skeptical about anything, because they can literally take nothing with a grain of salt.
I don't feel like people can be like, this is what you can and can't do in comedy. I feel like what you should or shouldn't do is better, but I don't think you can ever say this isn't funny beyond your own subjective tastes.
Right.
this isn't funny to me, I think this is awful and garbage, that's a totally valid reaction. But this is never funny.
Right.
You can find a lot of dirtbags in the world who think a lot of horrible things are hilarious.
Right.
So it's kind of a weird thing to kind of set rules for. But you definitely have to be sensitive to the percentages of, knowing your audience, knowing a crowd, knowing yourself, and being able to kind of connect with people. Because, that's what stand-up is connecting with people.
Why do you think people like dark humor? Why do you think people, often find laughter and stuff that's on the surface, definitely not a funny topic? Like you mentioned rape or suicide or those kinds of really dark things.
A lot of it is the same reason people watch horror movies. It's this, you're creating this space, and I'll call it a safe space outside of safe space connotation. I'll call it's a safe space to say wrong things, to be wrong, to go outside of your normal, polite, day-to-day interactions with people, and occasionally say horrible things, and people being like, ha, we're free from the normal bounds of whatever. So if you can talk about dark material in a really smart, clever, or well-written way, in a way that doesn't paint you as sort of like this unempathetic monster, you can connect with people in a way that you can't by being kind of saccharine and polite and, I don't know, milquetoast. So I always think there's a great space in comedy for the wrong things and for dark subjects, but you got to be smart about it, and you can't just be like some guy complaining on message boards about, why can't I tell a rape joke? It's like, because you specifically can. It's not a rule, but you can't because you're not at that point.
Right.
And you don't have anything to say about it. And I think that's another thing is, it's kind of this last year I've been trying to get into this thought, and it's been liberating as hell. Nobody cares what I have to say.
Yeah.
And nobody cares about your opinion, which is freeing. It's not a shut up and don't say anything, but I read it as, I don't have to have an opinion about everything. I don't have to go do every sort of dark joke just to run the bases. You just stick to what you are attracted to, what things in your life are funny, and build those things up instead of having this checklist of all of the forbidden things that you're not supposed to talk about that you're going to talk about, because damn it, nobody tells you what to do, and say. I don't know, it's a hard line, because I'm so on both sides in a lot of ways about you shouldn't do certain kinds of comedy unless you're at a certain confidence level. I have rape jokes, and I don't really tell them, but there is definitely a fear there where I'm like, it's not just a fear, but just like everyone's going to hate me, even though they're pretty clever. But there's also kind of this is unnecessary. There are times where I've done sets and my main one is a joke, and this is an actual true story. My best friend at his job came in contact with a guy named Ray Ping Jr. And that's a real story, and I created this whole bit about it, and kind of the main part is, why don't you go by Raymond, and what kind of monster, it's a junior, so you have two sets of bad parents there. Yeah. So it's a word joke, but it's also kind of unnecessary in most situations, and it's not something that I will never, I don't retire any jokes if I think there is potential, but it's not something that you need to bust out every open mic, because it's kind of, you don't approach that sort of topic lightly. And I think a lot of new comedians kind of do, and that's fine. I feel like you have to have that room to just bomb and die in front of people and realize, hey, those people hate that. Yeah. And so you just have to you have to experiment and you have to fail. And I feel like a lot of the popular culture about stand-up comedy at this point wants to take that away. or is against that sort of try and fail.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a negative. Like, you can have whatever opinions you want about someone's terrible garbage jokes, but the best criticism for a bad joke is silence.
Yes.
So
yeah, that's definitely the best teacher. I mean, there is nothing like bombing and just having that, like, oh, I shouldn't do this. This is horrible. Like, yeah.
Not even booing, just dead
nothing.
silence.
I think that suicide is an environmental act. I think if I killed myself, it might help make the world a better place, because I took one of those carbon footprint quizzes, and I found out that I'm like 85 percentile, like the worst carbon footprint in the world. And you know what that means? It means I have a really big carbon dick.
There have been a number of famous comedians who've, died at their own hand, although several of those, like Greg Giraldo and that sort of, Mitch Hedberg, those were accidental overdoses.
Yeah.
Richard Jeni, who was one of my favorite comedians growing up, he killed himself in 2007, had, a horrendous battle with really severe depressive, suicidal thoughts, even schizophrenia. So why do you think some of the funniest people are also some of the most depressed and self-loathing?
I'm going to go into kind of a weird area, and this isn't in my entire answer, but I think in part the reason creative people are more prone to suicide, especially these days, is that creativity does not pay. Creativity does not give you the stability that maybe it used to. People do things for exposure. People have to kind of subject themselves to kind of scraping to get by still, and maybe doing sort of the less desirable jobs. And this might not necessarily apply to sort of the top shelf comedians, but I also think that there's less of a respect given to creative people, which is weird because there's such a flood of creativity now. There's so much entertainment just everywhere that I think that becomes its own problem, because there's a lot of addiction in kind of being a consumer of creativity. So it's like people like me, who I would consider myself an addict, and not drugs, because I'm not really into drugs, but just like consuming entertainment, being focused on something and not kind of letting yourself fill your own voids and fill your own silence with just kind of calmness. We need creativity more than ever, yet it also just isn't valued. And maybe it's because the market's flooded, and maybe it's because there is so much creativity that we don't have to value an individual comedian or an individual musician or performer. So everyone's kind of adrift because nobody really needs to be cared about. Just kind of a weird way of looking at it. I also, there's an obvious answer that people who are creative are so open and empathetic that the filters that most normal people have aren't really there. So, you get flooded with everything, which is why I think in a lot of ways I'm extremely depressed and sad and angry and bitter a lot of the time, is because I still have to work. I still have to work a job that I feel is beneath me, that doesn't use my brain, doesn't use my talents, and I just kind of am treated like a robot by a lot of the customers. So it's, I don't know, it's part of that too. It's sort of the dance monkey kind of phenomenon, where these people are spending their time just building things, and then what they build is their life, but their life is just someone else's product. It's their stimulus. I used to review a lot of albums and books and things, and my column was called The Designer's Drugs, because I view entertainment as a drug, which is why I consider myself an addict, even though I'm not into chemicals or substances.
Right.
I don't know, people aren't valued in the same way as maybe they used to be, but there are also a lot less comedians back in the day, and a lot less musicians, so it's well,
and I think too is decades ago, I mean, you weren't the internet and streaming services and all, like you said, all this flood of entertainment
Yeah.
wasn't there 20, 30 years ago. And now with the internet, there's so much access to everything
Yeah.
that's, so that's kind of the problem with trying to make money off of being a performer.
Yeah.
It's even harder to.
And you
get
need that
people
safety.
Yeah.
You need that security. And if you're in your late 40s, early 50s, and you're a comedian, and you're still kind of doing the circuit and staying at sort of the flea-bitten comedy condos and things like that, like there may be a cold rationality that comes into your brain that says, is this what you want to do for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like my own middle-aged kind of suicidal thoughts are not really spiky and not really emotional.
Mm-hmm.
They're a lot more, this is what your life is this what you still want?
Yeah.
Or fight your way out of it, or you're going to be miserable forever, and do you want to be miserable forever? And
Right.
that's sort of where you start seeing the early exits.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel a lot of it is creative people seeing that their life isn't what they want it to be for whatever reason, and not really willing to continue on in that way, and maybe not knowing how to get out of it. I think
Right.
that's a lot of like,
Once you've gone so far down the rabbit hole, how do you get back out?
yeah, there's such an attitude of everybody has to be a superhero and self-sufficient and find their answers themselves. And my problems with being addicted to just entertainment, and it's just entertainment, it's so hard to kind of fight that because people don't respect that. People don't view the fact that, I mean, I am my father's son. My dad plays poker 16 hours a day. I can do that with video games. I am an obsessive, and it's something that if you give me some other purpose, I can drop it. But when I don't have any other purpose, that's all I do. And if I'm not doing it, then I feel like I'm just kind of standing around waiting, and I don't know. There's a lot of voids that I have no idea how to fill,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of like getting back into school has given me this weird new purpose, and kind of dropped the old addictions and just kind of got really hard into studying and working. So people need to be given something to do.
But I'm really envious about potheads in the South. This is a pot mecca. People from around the world like face this way and pray 3 times a day.
At this point in your life, why do you keep doing comedy? Like, do you need it in your life to I don't know, like to stay sane at this point? It's something you really want to do. Like, where do you see yourself going with it at this point?
I would like to make comedy albums.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's really not necessarily my glass ceiling as far as what I want to do in stand-up, but it's the tangible goal I want to achieve at some point. I want to create things. I want to write books. I have these stories I've been rolling over in my head since I was like 4 years old. I've, a lot of times when I'm not hanging out with people, I'm at home listening to music and telling myself stories, which I have been unable to write and, kind of transfer into reality, into something where other people can see it. And that's kind of where stand-up kind of comes in too. It's like translating your ideas from this sort of theoretical thought into words, and people react to it. And that's kind of, I just want to create things, and comedy, stand-up is one of the things I want to create. It's not the only thing I want to create, but it definitely helps me stay busy and stay creative. My biggest problem in life, just start to finish, is that I don't write. So comedy is something that I struggle with really hard, which is why I always, whenever I bomb, it's because I haven't been writing. Whenever I'm, a lot of my depression, a lot of my dark thoughts come from not writing.
The idea that you're not doing enough, that you should be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the you're not who you should be. So
Yeah.
stand-up's definitely a part of that. I'm a lot less egotistical than I used to be, although I'm still extremely egotistical. So I kind of changed my goal as far as comedy. You go in being like, I want to be the best comedian ever. And I think my goal right now, and these aren't exclusive goals, but my goal now is I want to be my favorite comedian. I want to be the person who I write jokes for and I laugh harder than anybody else who laughs at my jokes. I've had that happen quite a few times. I had it happen a lot when I was writing this suicide set, where I just was in love with these ideas and my brain was extremely energized and I felt like I had purpose. Weird that I would have purpose talking about doing myself in, but it's really the thing that makes me happiest in life is cutting through all the other crap in my life and all of the like addictions and being overstimulated by entertainment, and actually being a creator instead of
making something,
a receptor, which is kind of how I feel most times. I just feel like I'm just something to be broadcasted to and to consume. So stand-up is a major, massive part of that. I would like to be able to do it professionally, but that all depends on how much I write. Like, I know I have the ability in a lot of things in life, not just stand-up, to be really, really good, but it's up to me. And a lot of times my depression comes from not living up to that.
So, I mean, if you're going back to school to get a quote unquote real job and go into teaching, and so even if you do end up, let's say you end up teaching history at, let's say, a high school level, you still intend on, when you're not working, definitely pursuing keep doing stand-up.
The great thing about being a teacher is you have 3 months off. And I could,
and nobody really ages. It's not like sports. You're not aging out of stand-up. No one ages out of.
Well, it's kind of the great thing about a lot of things that I'm interested in creatively is, I want to write books, I want to write novels and do stand-up. And all of those things you can still do when you're old, provided your brain holds up,
You mentioned, recording albums, basically just you'd like to get to the point where even if you're not doing it professionally, that you're getting some club work so that you're able to record an album, basically.
And actually I feel like teaching kind of ties in with that, because I would be spending 9 months out of the year talking for like 8 hours a day and kind of ditching the fear of being in front of a crowd, because I'm sure nobody's going to be more hostile than self-centered teenagers who don't really want to learn about the Civil War. So you have to find a way to make that interesting and get through to an audience. So it's almost, to me, like feeling like what I want to do as far as what I'm going to pay the bills with is tied in extensively with what I want to do just creatively that really isn't going to pay the bills on any massive level, but I also will have 3 months out of the year to go tour. So and do weekends and things like that. So
exactly,
it's just, my goal is ultimately just to get my life to a point where everything kind of plays off everything else. Like the skills I'm going to learn teaching are going to make me an incredibly better comedian, as far as just speaking and connecting with people. And so that's a goal, and I'm still far from it, which is why all the dark thoughts are still there. But it's an improvement. There's an incline, and I can kind of see it, and it's sometimes still extremely frustrating, and I just want to run away and just kind of bury myself. Not literally. I guess that probably came out wrong. But a lot of my problems are just that I'm not doing what I want to do, and I'm not who I should be. And I think that's a lot of people's problems. It's just
definitely. I mean, I've talked to multiple people on this show that kind of feel the same way, the fear of not putting all this effort into it and not getting to where you want to go, or just not putting enough effort into what you like to do for whatever reason.
Definitely part of the problem is you knowing that you let yourself down.
Anyone who does anything creatively, any sort of writing creatively, runs into dry spells where you got writer's block, you're struggling to come up with a spark, discipline, whether it's even the desire to just force yourself to spend enough time writing and getting yourself into that frame of mind in order to write humor, especially. I guess what are some of your mental hang-ups in writing, and how have you overcome those before? I mean, like when you're like, I don't feel any joke premises coming on, anything new, I'm not writing enough down. I mean, how do you get over that?
You sit down and do it. That's the problem, is my life feels so compartmentalized. This is one of my big hang-ups in life, is I'm kind of afraid of my house. Not in a terror way, but in the living room is, if I sit down in the living room, I'm not going to get anything done. And there's such a routine to, I get home, I'm mad about something at work, I sit down, and then the day's gone. Like I have these things that happen in my day-to-day life where I realize that the day is over, even when it really isn't. And you can, at any time, stand up and go sit down in front of your computer and get some work done. It's just, a lot of my problems in life have to do with establishing routines and kind of breaking the old habits and the old mindsets. It's why I stopped drinking for a year. And it had very little to do with me having any sort of problems drinking. Like, I felt like mentally dark, but I wasn't doing anything awful. I wasn't saying anything terrible to people. But
I was drinking a half a fifth every day.
No, it wasn't a quantity issue. Some of it had to do with a consumption issue, where I feel like if I have booze in the house, I have to drink it.
Okay,
which is why I don't buy cigarettes, but I bum smokes off people all the time, because there's less of a compulsion to consume. But yeah, just all these weird, like, mental things. And I just kind of quit drinking for a year just to see if I could. And I did, but it's kind of like you quit the wrong addiction. It's like, okay, let's see if you can stay off Facebook for a year. That hasn't gone as well. But it's, just all of these kind of weird mental compartmentalizing things in my head, where it's so easy just to sit down and just do things, but there's so much around. There's so much stimulus that just draws that away. So it's I used to tell people that I could lock myself in an empty room and just has a little pile of dirt in it, and I would distract myself playing with the dirt instead of getting something done. So it's real hard, but the solution is easy. It's just doing it, which is hard.
Yeah, Robert Frost said something about, like, the hardest part of, like, being a poet is just, like, getting yourself to sit in a chair and, like, write poetry.
And that's it. That's all there is to it. And you can just kind of, once you let yourself kind of explode, it's good.
There's all kinds of things I've read about writers, like, God, I don't remember his name, but there's one guy who's really prolific fiction writer, and, he was saying, like, I can't write on my computer if it has the internet, and like he like physically like ripped out the place where the modem port, just ripped everything out of there so he wouldn't have any access to the internet, so he could write. And
I have to use a program on my computer that blocks certain websites like Facebook and things like that, and I have app blockers on my phone that are active all day and then there's like 2 hours a day where I can use the internet and use Facebook and stuff on my phone. I let myself like message people, things like that, and that's all fine. But you have to create barriers for yourself, because like I have the junkie mentality. I have my dad's gambler blood. So it's like you can't believe that you have the control, or at least I can't. I can't do it. I don't have the mental kind of structure, like the mental processes to get anything done on my own. I have to chain myself away from things, and a lot of whatever improved mental health I have is knowing that and not pretending that I can just punch my way through all of these bad behaviors and habits. Like you have to commit. I think that's why I did really well in school this last year and a half, because there was somebody outside of me expecting things from me. And that's a big problem with me, is when nobody expects me to write a good joke, nobody expects me to write a good story, I don't feel like it's vital, which is kind of sad. It just makes me feel like I don't value myself in the way that I should. But if a teacher says, write me a 35-page paper about the early history of modern comedy, I drove myself off the edge writing that, but I did it.
And I'd imagine you got an A on it?
A minus.
A minus, all right.
I had to let myself not freak out. Like, writing about stand-up comedy this year actually almost made me quit comedy.
Ooh.
Not because I learned anything bad, but just like the fear of writing just got so intense this year, doing like high-level history courses. Being able to write this great paper about early stand-up comedy clubs and early stand-up records in like the 50s and 60s was wonderful to learn about, especially as someone who's kind of in the field on an amateur level. But just the fear of writing about it, like I was getting panic attacks, like just writing papers this year and like almost crying about it. Yeah. So just, I don't know, it's this massive fear that is the main thing between me and, if not happiness, satisfaction in my life.
So that sort of leads us into the bonus round of questions, which never go in the radio edit, but are always in the podcast. And the first one we've already kind of addressed. What's the closest you've ever come to death? Now, when you were 25, I would assume that's...
Yeah. I almost cut my foot off once.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I have a lot of weird, like, bodily injury stories. One of my favorites is when I was in California, me and my friends would take furniture out into the canyons and hook it up to the back of a truck and ride it around in a circle. And one time I got really drunk and really high, and my friend had a really sharp axe because he's a crazy redneck, and I ran up to a couch and I was going to attack it, and I swung at the couch and I missed it completely, and I hit with this really sharp axe myself right in the ankle.
Whoa.
And the only thing that stopped me from having a stump is that since I was so drunk and high, my grip was loose, and the blade turned around and I hit myself with the flat end.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite stories.
Wow.
I once wore a child's fireman helmet while riding a car through a car wash, and the spinning thing hit me right in the head, and the child's fire helmet saved me from being demented or whatever.
Jeez.
Even beyond the suicide thing, I should not be as healthy as I am. And that's just me being a big idiot. That's just me and my friends like jumping on cars and having them speed down the road and just ridiculous crap. And that's done out of joy. That's not even done out of sadness.
Right. Okay. So, but then back into the other question. I mean, whether it's rational or irrational, what do you fear most in life? And it seems like not living up to your own expectations is pretty...
There's that. There's a couple of things. I'm afraid of madness, crazy people.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm crazy myself, but that I attract crazy people. I attract nuts people, and I can't deal with it. Like, I've had stalkers, one of whom almost kind of ruined me being a stand-up comedian. Like, it's a guy from my hometown who I called out for being a racist online, and he started posting on any video of me doing stand-up saying really horrible things about me, completely untrue. And that was kind of one of the first moments where I realized that I kind of have a tribe here, because everyone else in the stand-up community totally had my back dealing with this guy. And I didn't know who it was for a long time because he used anonymous, names and whatever. It's like Twitter stalking.
Yeah.
Once I found out who he was, it was fine, because anytime he would pop up and say horrible things about me, I would just be like, it's this guy from this place, and here's his website, here's the place he works, So it's like crazy people like that. And all I did online was just be like, you're kind of a racist and you're a dick. Right. And that led to literally years of him following me online. And it's part of why I don't post videos online, is because I don't want him to come back.
Right.
My irrational fear is overpasses.
Really?
Yeah, it's...
So being on them or being under them?
Being on them, walking across an overpass, and specifically an overpass over a highway. If it's over water, I'm fine. A couple of years ago, I was walking on Bakerview and walking toward the string of gas stations because I lived up on the north side then. And I walked over this overpass and all the cars going below me and everything. I almost had a panic attack. I almost flipped out. And
regardless of what kind of fence there is, it's just being over that.
Well, I think if there was a high fence, I think I would be okay with it. Something where I kind of have this fear that a strong wind is going to blow me over or whatever.
That one in Alabama, right by Trader Joe's, right before you get into that, right between. That's the one where anyone could just jump right over.
Yeah, and that's how it was on Bakerview too. So I almost freaked out and started crying and had to force myself one step ahead of the other to cross this overpass. And somehow that's not how it is with bridges. I'm fine. I guess I figure I would just fall into the water or something, even though from a certain height it doesn't matter. I have no idea. It's weird when you get older, and it's kind of great and fun to realize new things that just terrify the hell out of you. I guess that's kind of the nice thing, because I always feel like I'm the old guy now, because I'm in my mid to late 30s, but just hey, there are new things about me, and even if they're terrible, it's kind of the adventure isn't over. You're not just the same person, the same old person set in, stone and calcified for the rest of your life, which is kind of why going back to school when I was 35 is this great thing, because it's your life isn't over.
I think it's easy to feel if you haven't done something right away, right out of college, or that you're kind of a failure and it's over. But it's no, I mean, you look at how people can find success and find their lives coming together in a way that makes them happy later in life. It's it could happen to anyone.
I mean, I specifically got a philosophy degree straight out of high school because I didn't want to get a job. So it's kind of that was a good thing, but it was also not a good thing.
It's worked out, if you want to call it that.
I mean, I use it. I can't quote anybody, any philosopher, but I know how to think, and it definitely made me smarter. It made me more critical and intelligent.
Thanks to Brett Emerson for being on the program. If you'd like to contact us, you can always message us or comment on the Are You Serious Facebook page. And be back in the next couple of weeks with another installment. Until then, I'm Matt Benoit for Are You Serious? You can keep it right here for more great local programming on KMRE 102.3 FM Bellingham.